All right, guys, so time for another little video here as far as peptides are concerned. So we're going with SLU-PP-332, and I think this one is one of those ones that's very interesting in terms of, where we might see this one go. I think, honestly, if you guys go back and you look at the first video I ever did here in this group specifically for peptides, it was on SS31, and SS31 has now been picked up, and they're going through trials here to get FDA approval. And I think SLU is the one that I think that we would see, the most likely one that I think that we'll see get picked up next, and potentially could be pushed in multiple different directions here. I'll actually be interested in which way they go, because I don't think it maintains as an oral. I think there's a little bit of an issue there from a bioavailability standpoint. I think we'll probably see, some of the effects change as they obviously manipulate the. And I think you're seeing it now. I've seen injectables that are available now. I don't know the viability of that either. So I guess we'll see how that plays out. But definitely interested to see where the SLU conversation goes. But a very cool product. I don't have anything up this time. I did that last time with the retatrutide video, and I basically put myself in a position where I was trying to reference like multiple different papers, and I didn't really like copy and paste anything in terms of the amounts, the clear things that I wanted. I was sitting there trying to read as I was in the middle of a video, which obviously didn't work out. So I have some notes here that I'll go into. But basically, what we have with SLU, without like losing everybody, right? Like, and remember, if you guys want additional information, like there's some of you guys I spoke to this week about it, and if there is additional information you guys want in terms of the details, let me know, because again, we could talk about, like, I have each like of the individual genes that this is gonna upregulate, I guess you could say, that are most, I think, important. But again, if you guys want deeper information, you let me know, and we could go over that privately. But essentially, SLU-PP-332 comes in, and it's an agonist. So it basically, we'll say, stimulates the estrogen-related receptors. Now, when we talk about estrogen-related receptors, these are nuclear, orphan nuclear receptors. The one thing I would say here is, like, don't think about estrogen as it relates to anything that we know about estrogen. It has nothing to do with your hormones whatsoever. This is not going to mess up a female's estrogen. This is not going to increase a male's estrogen. This has nothing to do with your estradiol whatsoever. It has nothing to do with either E1, E2, E3. It has nothing to do with those hormone, the hormone estrogen whatsoever. This is completely, totally different conversation. But it comes in and it works as an agonist, or activates these receptors, which ultimately have a downstream effect on something called PGC alpha 1, which is a co-activator, which does work with, transcription factors, to kind of combine to be a increased gene expression is essentially what it does. Or how do we explain that? So again, when it comes to genes, like genetics is something that I've talked about a decent bit too. And obviously I made a post not that long ago on Instagram about, like, a poodle will always be a poodle, a pit bull will always be a pit bull. We can't turn a poodle into a pit bull. And that's more of a comparison concept, right? Like when we're looking at Instagram, we can't compare ourselves. And obviously everybody knows that they can't compare themselves, but yet you still tend to do it. And the reality is, in terms of why you can't compare yourself, it's because you're never, ever, 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 ever going to be that person. It doesn't matter how much work you put in. It doesn't matter if you listen to this or you listen to that post I made and then you go to bed tonight thinking, yes, no, I'm just going to work really hard. You can work as hard as you want. At the end of the day, you're going to be the best version of yourself, and that's probably never going to be exactly what you want it to be over here. That's just the reality, right? And again, that's based off of our genetics, and for this particular purpose, we'll call it genetic limitations, right? Now, when we talk about this increasing gene expression, I had this conversation with a client a couple weeks ago about this with a different compound, where they're like, so we're improving my genetics. And I would say no. So the way that I would try to explain this, and I think this is a good way of putting it, is essentially, let's just say that everybody has like a scale. Let's say you're 0 to 100, right? We'll call for this for again, just this is just an example. We have multiple different genes that we can look at on SLU, but let's just say, as an example, your ability to burn fat, right? We'll say can go 0 to 100, right? That's what everybody's maximum genetic, profile is. We'll say, right, or abilities are. Right. But let's say the person we're comparing ourselves to on Instagram has the genetic ability to be able to be 100. Right. And then I have the genetic capabilities to be at 50 is my max. Right. What happens is we're not always at our maximum ability in terms of these genes being expressed or these genes being kind of in on mode. Right. So even if that person that is, has the ability to be at 100, sometimes they're here, sometimes they're here, sometimes they're here, right? But what SLU does is it comes in and it turns on these genes to be more effective, right, when it's in there. So we're kind of maximizing as best we can our individual gene expression, down these paths. So again, it's one of those things where does that make me exceed my ability to be at 50? Like, it's not going to make me go to 60. It's not going to make me go to 70 or 75. It's just going to make me be at 50 more often. Does that make sense? I think that makes sense. I actually think that was a pretty good way of explaining it, where usually I suck at things like that. So again, we have all these genes that it'll increase the expression of, or increase that kind of sliding scale, push us to our maximum end of that. And essentially, it's reducing electron leakage, improving ATP production, reducing reactive oxygen species. Which again, all that type of stuff, I'm going to lose everybody on that. But ultimately, at the end of the day, the bottom line is it's allowing you to take. We always talk about food as fuel, right? The reality is food in and of itself isn't fuel yet. Food has to go through an amazing amount of processes to ultimately become ATP production. And there's a lot of other things involved with that concept too. But again, as it relates to fuel in our body, what we need is ATP. And if we can increase the amount of ATP that we're putting out or have more efficiency when it comes to producing that ATP, at the end of the day, we can create better factories that produce this ATP and more ATP output. Does that make sense? So actually what we really want to do is increase the amount of raw material and workers in this factory, improve our factories, and then improve the output of those factories. That's a pretty good way of putting it too. So essentially, the SLU will come in and allow us to do that through very specific, ways of, getting that end output, right? So you might hear the same exact conversation, right, around the idea of things like SS31, like we already talked about. MOTC is another one here, even retatrutide to a certain extent. And again, they all might, NAD plus is another one that we talk about where this could be the case. 5-amino-1-MQ. And again, they all do have this impact. But again, when you think about a large grade industrial facility, right, that ends up producing all these products, right, that exist. And let's just say it's like an Amazon plant, right? And Amazon doesn't, put out one thing, right? It puts out all these different things, and that creates their end outcome in terms of, generating revenue and being successful in a day and all that different stuff, right? So for us, it is ATP is the end product that we want. That's our revenue. But at the end of the day, they have multiple different workers in multiple different fields and multiple different places, I guess you could say, within this, facility that they work in, right, that allows them to get there. So SLU might be helping this section of the facility. SS31 might be something where it improves the safety profile of the facility to have more efficiency of the workers going through, where 5-amino-1-MQ might be like, we're giving the workers energy drinks at every single stop to be able to improve their efficiency, so on and so forth, right? There's multiple different ways to be able to work it. So SLU comes in its own way and helps us improve that end product that we're doing, which again, for us basically means better fat burning, overall nutrient utilization, right, which ultimately allows us things like glucose sensitivity, better triglyceride use, better, well, I guess I already said better fat oxidation, better fat burning, but better fat utilization, better carbohydrate metabolism, or better carbohydrate utilization, I should say, which ultimately drives up our glucose sensitivity. I put cell efficiently leads to better. No clue what I said there. Better organ efficiency, including things like brain health. So we talk about ATP, we talk about better end output, right? We kind of boil it down to things like fat burning, performance, right? In the gym, our ability to build muscle goes up, right? All these different things are definitely things that we want to be considerate of as it relates to like our physique. But I think a lot of times, especially with these peptides, we're missing the benefits from an overall health perspective, right? And for years and years and years, the compounds that we've always had to be able to influence these things, even on smaller levels, like things like SARMs, right? SARMs were huge, still are kind of big, but like they were huge for a little while, right? And SARMs are one of those things, especially if you use them, they come in, and are they strong relative to you going to get creatine, let's say, from GNC? Yeah, sure. It might make you a little bit stronger. You might feel a little bit more fullness than anything you could buy that's natural or over the counter. But at the end of the day, most people would take something like that. They'd be like, this is it. This is what I'm going to get out of. This isn't a very strong, but like I'm not getting huge here. I'm not turning in, like this isn't the end all be all for me. I increased this lift by 5 pounds, right? And like I didn't increase this one at all. And like I'm not shredded and I'm not jacked. That's because they don't do the job for you, right? Same exact concept here. This isn't doing the job for you, but it absolutely drives a relatively significant outcome as it relates to our ability to be able to burn fat, build muscle, our performance in the gym. But my point that I was trying to make there was the fact that when we take something like SARMs, we have to accept the reality that there is going to be peripheral issues there. There is going to be collateral damage there. There is going to be side effects that we're going to get from this. When you take steroids, like people are like, oh, I don't do SARMs, I do Anavar. As if that doesn't have some sort of additional risk factors to it, or as if that doesn't have risk factors to it. Or also have additional risk factors to it. I use TRT. Again, that could be something that has, additional risk factors to it, especially if we don't get the dosage right. But again, somebody could say like, oh, I use Primobolan, and that's like the safe steroid, yada, yada, yada. But again, these things all have their risk profiles that are attached to them. Whereas something like SLU and a lot of the peptides, I'm not saying that they don't have potential risk factors. Again, we have very limited, if at all, human clinical data on this. But the reality is our anecdotal evidence is starting to pile up at this point. And there is research on these things that exists for some time now. Granted, it's in animal models, but it does exist for some time. And again, our anecdotal evidence is really starting to pile up. And I know people like to say, but it's from China and it's this and I don't give a shit. The fact of the matter is the evidence is there. And again, we have a lot of you guys that have used some of these things and have done the blood work, right, that we've looked at there. And again, a lot of it is very, very favorable. So again, the point that I really want to make here is when we take SARMs, when we take our anabolic steroids, when we take the clenbuterols, the T3s, all these different things, in a lot of cases, what we're trying to do is mitigate risk. We're trying to run it in the very healthiest way possible. We're sticking to minimal dosages, right, to be able to get the greatest outcome, right? And you guys know the way that we do it really is a minimal intake and trying to get a maximum output, right? But what happens with the SLU-PP-332 and or a lot of the peptides that come in, we're looking at that because of this end product of ATP production being the primary concept that we're interested in, we're getting a lot of give off in terms of improving health outcomes, right? Like improving kidney function, improving heart health, improving brain function, right? Improving these bigger, things that require more energy for them to do their jobs, right? Like obviously skeletal muscle tissue is a huge thing there that is going to require a ton of energy, but we have other organs in the body like the kidneys that are very costly from an energy production standpoint. We have the brain that's very costly from an energy production standpoint, the heart that's always working, right? Like these things need a significant amount of ATP too. So when we go through that process of increasing their fuel, right, they're going to be able to run more efficiently, and that's just a logical outcome. But again, we do see it in the research, especially within the animal models that we have. And again, we've seen it anecdotally now with SS31, with the Motzi being another one. And some of those have had some crazy, like ridiculously amazing outcomes from an overall health. Like we've seen healing from these things that far exceeds expectations. Far exceeds expectations at this point. And I'm talking human healing that far exceeds expectations. Like ridiculously exceeds expectation. Look at Alex Kiko does a lot of work down that. He actually just posted something about how his dog, his small dog, was having seizures. Because I forget what it was. I'd have to go back. I forget exactly why he was having seizures. But it looks like he got him back to 100%, no problems, the dog, utilizing peptide therapy, which I'm not going to recommend anything for your dog ever. But nonetheless, obviously he's far and away more educated on that than I am. But So again, I think when it comes to the benefits there, again, performance in the gym, and that shouldn't be overlooked, especially as it relates to the aerobic performance that we get. We're getting ATP production. We are getting, less. We're regulating, I should say, energy stress better. Remember, we talked about in that SS31 video, I liken the mitochondria of the cell to like a time machine, right? And every time we go back in time, every time it works, the only problem with going back in time is, we damage the machine a little bit, right? It gives off a lot of this energy that comes back and damages the time machine. Right? That's what happens with our mitochondria. As they're producing that energy, they have this give off. And that give off is unfortunately damaging to the mitochondria itself and limits the overall lifespan, especially when those things get pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed, right? But again, that's one of the negatives of like people that are constantly like training 7 days a week and like doing all this stuff and like thinking that it's okay, I'm working hard. Working hard has its impact, right? From an overall stress perspective. So again, this comes in and it helps regulate, for lack of better verbiage, regulate energy stress. We'll call it, protect against that energy stress to a certain extent. And it's not really protecting against it. I would say it's more so regulating the amount of give off that it has, and kind of minimizing the give off that it has. By being more efficient with the process is the best way of explaining that. What else? What else do we have? Mitochondrial biogenesis. So improving, we were talking about those factories before. Sometimes, unfortunately, these factories, right, they might have, significant, they're in business for 10, 20, 30 years of producing very high end, outputs. But sooner or later, that factory, because it becomes out of dates, right? The area around it starts to go down a little bit. So maybe they don't have as many workers, right? And then ultimately what happens, that end product just gets hurt, right? It's not producing the same end product anymore. So what we have the capability of doing internally is essentially, taking another factory that's nearby or plant or industrial, facility that's nearby that maybe is also struggling in the same way that this one is. And we'll kind of like, okay, let's get rid of all the dead weight, right? And fuse these two things together so that now we have one facility, right, that is working as efficiently as it should be, instead of having two facilities that are kind of half-assing it and not getting as much output as we want. So the SLU comes in and it does allow us to be more efficient down that pathway as far as getting not just the best outcomes from these facilities, but even when the facilities are struggling, right, it makes it a more efficient process to get to the healthiest facilities, if that makes sense. You know what I'm saying there. So again, I think, what the way that I would really look at SLU, that's kind of all I have. I also put in here a thing about redox balance, but I don't know really how we would go into that without losing everybody even more so. I would say people that might want to think twice, or probably won't get as good of a result, right? Because I was going to say people that want to think twice about using this. That sounds ominous, right? I would say the people that might want to think twice about using it because they might not get the result that they want are people that are going through a tough time right now as far as like sleep might not be there, right? Maybe it's been maybe they're really overweight and it's been a long time that they need to start dieting. And again, their lifestyle in general isn't a very healthy lifestyle for multiple different reasons. They're, again, not getting enough sleep, not really working out right now, over consuming, eating a lot of junk food, right? Taking too many stimulants on a regular basis. And now they're like, okay, I'm going to start this fat loss thing. Tim says, this is pretty cool. Let me start taking SLU to burn more fat and make my body more efficient because I know it's not. Unfortunately, your body's probably not in a good position to be able. I look at SLU as something that's really good in the middle ground, right? Like this person probably needs to do more work first and foremost to be able to get, a little bit more of their own natural efficiencies built up, right? To make sure that their body is able to express that energy utilization, express those genes efficiently on its own before you bring in something like SLU. And then on top of that, I would also say somebody that's already been dieting really hard, like let's say a bodybuilder, right, at the tail end of contest prep. I don't think SLU is the right thing to bring in at the tail end of that contest prep. And then we just are essentially making something that's already overworked work more, right? I think that's where maybe like SS31 comes in. Right, like there's other ones that would be, I think, more beneficial in those scenarios. Whereas SLU might be that thing that's right in between that's a really good. So for me, like a primer phase, right? When it's like, hey, I want to diet soon. Okay, well, you're at whatever, a female's at 300 grams of carbs. Realistically, that's not where we're going to start our diet. Let's start to bring down those carbohydrates, right? And get closer and closer to that deficit while maybe even touching a deficit on a primer phase might be something that lasts, 6, 8, 10 weeks, maybe, right? So we have this chunk of time where we're kind of getting the body set up to more effectively burn fat once we're in a deficit. SLU might work perfectly right there, right? We have a lot of food coming in. We're trying to get better utilization of that food to get that end out product of ATP or get that end product of ATP production, right? And again, we're fueled to be able to do this. We're not overstressing our body. We already have a good sleeping pattern. We're already taking, the right supplements to be able to support this and ultimately get the best outcomes from it. So again, we're not kind of like in an unhealthy place, right? And trying to go right into a weight loss diet. We're already in a healthy place and going into another maybe weight loss diet, right? We're not at the tail end of a weight loss diet. Or again, maybe somebody, now we've gone through a primer phase and we really want to get the most out of this weight loss process, right? And really jumpstart it and kickstart it well. Then maybe we do an entire primer phase and then put the SLU-PP-332 in to really start that dieting phase and drive it a little bit more aggressively from the get-go. That could be something that's pretty efficient too. But again, I think that there's maybe a little bit more of a clear place where SLU is going to be most efficient versus some of the other compounds that could work really well within the same exact landscape that we just spoke about where SLU might shine. But then again, they also do work well at the tail end of a dieting phase for multiple reasons. Or maybe even when somebody's like coming from a very unhealthy spot and wants to start, right? They might make a lot of sense in that particular case. SLU also, another one actually that's a really good favorite of mine. We did this recently. Actually, maybe I shouldn't say the name because I don't know if they want me to say it or not. But bottom line, we've had a few clients this off season where we ran SLU. In fact, I have one client that did have significant kidney issues based on what we saw. And when we say based on what we saw, I can tell you right now, we had probably like 6 or 7 different things of blood work. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different things of blood. No, 8 different things of blood work. But, well, the 8th one, I guess, doesn't count because that one was good. 7 different things of blood work showing us that we had really, really poor kidney outcomes. Right. And they weren't necessarily crazy unhealthy or anything like that. They never did like huge amounts of steroids or anything like that. Just had really low output or efficiency as far as kidney health is concerned. And we did a whole bunch of stuff. We didn't just add in SLU, but it was one of those things that we were like, okay, listen, this makes a lot of sense based off the research. We've also seen it work anecdotally. Let's add this in. And we kept that in for a long period of time, all the way through the off season. I think one of the benefits, not only did we get to a point where towards the end of the offseason that we had, which again is a growth phase that usually puts its own toll on kidneys, we actually saw that those numbers for kidney function come all the way up. We're not just talking about EGFR, creatinine, we also talking about cystatin C. So we saw all of these things improve greatly, like tremendously, like the best improvement I think I've ever seen for somebody that was that low for me, and clients I've worked, for somebody that was as low as they were, which was relatively scary, to be all the way back up into a relatively healthy range, by far the best improvement I ever saw. But the bottom line is that process. I think we also had a scenario there where they were able to maintain a very, very, good look through a relatively long push there at, pretty good amount of food. But again, I think the point that I was trying to get there was the other side of SLU utilization, I think, is an off-season, or when we're trying to, it doesn't have to be off-season, right? We're talking about bodybuilding verbiage now. Everybody has a point, right? Where we're dieting, everything's going well, and then Tim says, hey, it's time that we stop dieting now. Like, let's bring things back, because we hit a point where it's not going well anymore. And then let's bring things back up and we'll maintain here, right? And it's like, we don't have to gain that much weight. And then everybody always ends up, 5, 8, 10, 12 12 pounds over where they want to be because we're eating food we probably shouldn't be eating, doing this and doing that we probably shouldn't be doing. SLU might be a key thing that we could bring in during those times, right? And it doesn't solve yours. You still got to work on your behavior. You still got to improve, your relationship with food, improve your habits around food. But it might absolutely help us maintain a lower body fat percentage during those times for sure. So again, very interesting in utilization of primer phases or the beginning phases of dieting, and then we'll call them metabolic restoration phases or times when we have to eat more food, right? Or will benefit to eat more food. So I think that's it for SLU. Obviously, ask any questions that you want as far as SLU is concerned. Even if you comment on the YouTube video, I will answer it in the WhatsApp group, or you could just ask it in the WhatsApp group, obviously. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I guess just ask it in the WhatsApp group. Yeah, SLU, very cool stuff.